Okay, we are live with Bonnie Powell, Senior Director of People at Bench. Do you still go by Bench Accounting sometimes, or we're just Bench now?
Bench Accounting is our trading name, but most people refer to us as Bench.
Amazing, and that's makes it feel more at home. And you're working from your home office in Australia, which is so fun because let's start with that story, Bonnie. Like I think most people wouldn't really be able to say that when they go to their boss with a hard conversation like you had to have last year, it went as well as it did. So can you kind of take us and share with us a little bit of your past year and a bit and how you've transitioned to another country and stayed working for a Vancouver-based amazing organization such as Bench?
Yeah, I'll do my best to get through it without getting too emotional.
Good. We want emotion.
My team and the people that work with me know that Bonnie is synonymous with emotion, so it's hard to separate. So I've been at Bench for 2.5 years, and about a year ago, my husband and I had a really, really tough decision to make related to our daughter's health.
Yeah.
She was born with a heart condition, and we were lucky enough to have the incredible people at BC Children's repair her heart. But the climate in Vancouver was really tough on her during the winter months. And so after another winter of many, many, many trips to the Emerge, pneumonia repeatedly occurring, we decided we needed, upon the advice of her pediatrician, to move back to Australia, where the climate, well, not all of Australia, but where I grew up on the Sunshine Coast, is pretty temperate all year. And so I had a really tough conversation with my boss, Ian, who is one of the most amazing humans. And I said, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do, is to leave a job that I love and care so much about, but I have to move back to Oz for my daughter. And so I need to resign. And he said, what? You don't need to resign, just be remote. And I said, but I'm your head of people. How am I supposed to be remote? Yeah. And he said, Bonnie, you figured out harder things in life before, figure it out. And so here we are nearly a year later. It is, I travel back often to spend time with my team and to spend time with the executive team. And I feel like the luckiest person in the world in that I get to do what I love every day, wake up and interact via video call with some of the most incredible humans I've ever had the privilege of meeting, and they're on my team, and do work that is so incredibly meaningful, and Ian has allowed me to then take care of my child. So it's an incredible story, and I feel very lucky to be able to share it with you.
Yes, and I love that you're my first person to do a live on LinkedIn podcast recording, because you've clearly got an awesome video setup. So compared to a lot of people, you're like already, this is so normal for you, which is great. It's sort of the way that we're moving towards, which I love to hear. So, I mean,
yeah, thanks a lot for that, by the way.
I pulled an audible on her. I was like, so we're going to just do a live video on LinkedIn, right? Like, you're cool with that?
I was like,
5 minutes ago.
5 minutes ago. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
yeah, it's kind of my style. I'm sorry.
This is slightly terrifying for me, but let's do it.
We're keeping it going. I am going to pull up LinkedIn on my phone just so I can make sure that if anyone asks a question, which feel free, ask a question. You can, pop into our LinkedIn live, discussion if you so choose and want to ask Bonnie a question. She has told me that at Bench, there's a bit of a default open policy for anything that she can answer. She will do her best to do that. Are we still on the same page about that, Bonnie?
Absolutely.
Great. Well, I mean, if I listen to that story, and again, as I was almost prefacing it, it's like, you don't hear that story very much. You hear, we're set in our ways, that's not going to work, sort of this defeatist mentality. Bench went the complete opposite way and said, no, we make things work. That's the company we want, and we're building that. And that was sort of probably a defining moment for you, where a lot of the work that you had been doing the year previous to build culture and focus on culture and work with the executive leadership team to focus on the culture and build what you thought you were going to build. Then when push came to shove and it was tested to its limit, it worked. And so let's go back then, 2.5 years ago when you joined the team. What was the culture like, and how have you thought through that with your executive team?
So the culture was always magnetic, and it was one of the key things that drew me to Bench. What I love about the startup world is, this freedom to essentially throw away the rule book, this corporate rule book that has governed organizations from the beginning of time of this is right, this is wrong, this is how business is done. And what I love about the startup world is that they're really challenging that notion of best practice. And actually one of the things that Ian said to me when I first joined is, I'm not interested in best practice, it doesn't really work. Go figure out what actually works for our business and go deliver that. And so that was one of the things that drew me to Bench from a cultural perspective. And what it was like at the time was incredible. But I think that what we have now is even more special. One of the first initiatives that I took on and encouraged Ian to take on was to publish these principles that he had in his head. And so he had these 5 principles, which he introduced to folks in our Bench Academy, which is the first day of joining. Yeah. You get an introduction to the company. And I said, we need to share this in a way that is more accessible than just on your first day. And so in really digging into what are the things that make us unique, what are the things that we truly believe in, and what are the what does it look like to really have a workable, thriving culture? And right. So we experimented with a bunch of ideas, and then we ended up publishing these 5 principles. And I think in doing so, there are 2 that have really, really resonated with our people: experiment together and default open. And there is nothing, I have never experienced anything quite like it. The freedom to experiment, and the freedom to experiment and fail. It's one thing to say, oh yeah, go run an experiment. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, this better not fail, because if it does, I'm out. And that is the opposite. And one of the conversations that I love the most having with my team, and that Ian has had with me so many times, is, isn't that amazing? You ran a failed experiment. Right. What have you learned? And to have an environment where you can fail and really learn and lean into your learning, I think that's why we are where we are today.
Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about what you've seen over the time period. I mean, there has been some highs and lows at Bench. I think you were describing a little bit of a low, but I think it was probably a really hard thing to go through. You had to let go of some people last year. Can you tell us about that experience? How did you take a people first approach to that? And what was sort of the lead up and then the fallout? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, that was really, really tough. It was about March last year, and we were at an executive offsite, and we looked at our financials, we looked at our numbers, and we came to terms with the fact that business wasn't going the way that we needed it to go. And that meant pivoting in a direction where we needed to say goodbye to some individuals and divest some areas of our business that weren't really returning profitable results that we needed. And so, the immediate default was, okay, what's the playbook here? What do companies do in this instance? It was the first company-wide layoff, that the incidents of saying goodbye to folks that I had led. Mm-hmm. And so I was terrified. I knew that we needed to live and breathe our principles through this time. It's one thing to have principles when things are going well and to say, these are the shiny things that happen when business is good.
Right.
It's another thing to really live them when times are tough. And I'm so proud to say that we did that. It doesn't mean that it was easy, and it doesn't mean that lives weren't impacted. But the approach that we took was a default open one. So Ian and I worked on a communication that we shared with the entire company in confidence and said, you know, in order to stay alive, in order to continue the pursuit of changing 1 million clients' lives, which is what we're out to do, is bring the mastery to 1 million people. We've got to keep this business afloat, and the only way we can do that is to reduce our burn rate, reduce our costs. And one of the ways we did that was by saying goodbye to some of our friends. So we shared that information with the entire company, and that's not typical. I've been in organizations where one day you turn up, everyone gets brought into a room, and all of a sudden you walk in with a job and you walk out without one. And we just knew that wasn't the approach that we wanted to take. Because it didn't feel at all like people are everything. And the other reason is that the people that are left behind need to feel like they can trust the leaders who are running this company. And so, we preach default open and people are everything. How could people have felt that if we had just blindsided them with, okay, all of a sudden these people are leaving? And so we shared as much as we possibly could. It was really tough for some people to know in advance. That the individuals themselves didn't know, but we shared at a company-wide level that we will be letting about 20 people go, and in the end it was 18. And some people really reacted poorly to the advance notice. And there were people that were frightened of sharing the news and what the outcome would be. But I knew it was the right thing to do. And I knew that that's what we had to do to lean into living what we said, which was being open and putting people first. And as it was, I think that the general response to those people who lost their jobs was, thank you for approaching this in such a human-centric way. Thank you for the respect that you've given us. We had one-on-one conversations with each individual, and provided references and all sorts of things to support them on their next chapter. Certainly one of the most difficult things I've ever been through. Hopefully we'll never have to go through that again. Business is thriving. We're, we've completely turned the ship around and growing like crazy.
Has anybody that left come back?
We actually did reach out to a couple of folks, but the timing wasn't right.
They had already found a new thing.
Yeah. But so it's funny because I've had friends of mine say, I'm confused. You're hiring 250 people, but didn't you just have that thing that happened? And I said, yeah, we did. We had this thing that happened, and our strategy worked. And as a result, we're now growing like crazy. My recruitment team has doubled. They hired nearly 300 people last year, which is no small feat in Vancouver. So it was a year of learning, and really, really being I was like I said, I was afraid. I was scared about how it was going to go, and I think it went as well as it possibly could have.
Okay, so I'm doing the quick mental math. Were you guys sitting at about 250 people when you needed to lay people off? What was your employee count before that?
Gosh, I'm thinking back. So it was, it would have been around between 250 and 300.
Okay, and so then
we're at 467 now.
Whoa. Oh, that's overwhelming to me. I'm just so excited that there's a Canadian story like this, that, that's number one, but also just the fact that you're being culture pioneers, right? You're showing the world what it looks like to grow rapidly and do this well and maintain a culture that people love to come and be part of. My interview last year that I finished the year off was with Carolyn Shen from Article, another Vancouver story, fastest growing company in Canada. And, you, both of you, I'm just like, yes, these amazing people, leaders. I'm so thankful that you're being willing to share your stories with me and my audience, but just more importantly, that you're doing this and you're literally reinventing the way that we do culture. And I really believe that this is going to be something people are writing about and learning about in HR degrees and, et cetera, in school, because it's like, whoa, we've never done this well before. We've learned from people in the past. I'm sure, let's talk about that. Best practice is one thing, but also there have been some people that have probably paved the way for you to learn what you learn and be able, so that you can show up to work the way you show up with your expertise. Mm-hmm. What is your pathway to knowing what you know been like, other than just learning from what your experience is at Bench?
Well, it's a great question. I was born with this knowing that I needed to leave the world in a better state than I found it. And I think where I really struggled throughout my corporate career is feeling like the value that I created in the roles that I was in was so limited, and that I was, kind of just on that corporate hamster wheel, if you like. And so there was always this inner knowing within me that said, we deserve, people deserve to be treated in a way that is respectful, and so that they can come to work feeling inspired. The demand for creativity today is so high, disruption. How do you get to come to work and be creative and disrupt and have that confidence to take risks when you're being watched, when someone's there leaning over your shoulder waiting for you to fail? It doesn't work. And so the freedom that I have had at Bench to create a culture that actually works for people is really because of Ian. Ian gave me that freedom to do that. He said, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, not interested in best practices, go and figure out what works. And while I was so terrified because all I knew was best practice, it actually wasn't all I knew, because I'd been waiting my whole life to have a canvas to go and create something that actually worked for people. And so some of the things that I did straight away was I threw out a bunch of policies. I just said, we're not doing that anymore.
I love it.
We had clawbacks in a bunch of our policies. So, you get a thing, but then you owe us. And I said, that doesn't feel right. How about we just invest in you, and then you don't owe us anything? And if you stick around, that's wonderful. And if you don't, you go off into the world more developed or more supported, and you get to take that with you into the world. Isn't that what's important? And so our maternity leave policy and paternity leave policy had a clawback. And I said, why are we doing that? Going through an event like bringing a child into the world is so transformational, and you really have no idea what it's going to mean on the other end for you. Why would we force somebody to come back to a job that they're now perhaps no longer connected to because their life has changed in whatever way? Why would we force them to come back and penalize them monetarily if they don't? Why wouldn't we just say, if you want to come back here, we've got something for you that's exciting, and if you don't, we wish you well. And so, there was a little resistance initially when I presented that, and I'm just thrilled that those are the types of things that I've been able to either throw out the clawback, or create. We have unlimited vacation, and we don't keep track of how many sick days you've had. It's like, we want you to be well. We don't want you to be thinking, oh my goodness, I've got one more day left before I don't get paid. So that was a very long-winded answer. I apologize.
I love it.
I'm a little bit passionate about, what works and what doesn't. And the last thing I'll say on this, Tynan, is that I think where a lot of organizations go wrong is they focus on the things that don't matter. So, and what I mean by that is at Bench, we focus on outcomes. So it's not relevant how many hours you spend at your desk. It's not relevant where you do your work. What's relevant to us is, are you delivering the results that we need to see? What are the outcomes that you're generating? And if you're doing that, the rest doesn't matter. And so I interview people for my team all the time, and they say, what are the hours? What hours do your team? And I said, you choose your hours. We want you to have a life that works for you. And no longer are people, wanting to be chained to their desk. I have team members that recently joined us that said they left their last job. They were being monitored on how many bathroom breaks they took, and would get an email to say, dear sir or miss, we've noticed that you're taking, more than your allotted bathroom breaks. I was like,
oh my gosh,
what year are we in? Rather than focusing on, how long someone's at their desk, what about their performance? What about their contribution? Are they delivering the things that you expect? And if the answer is yes, let them be. If they're not, then let's have a conversation about where the performance isn't meeting expectations. Let's have a conversation about how, what's working and what isn't. Let's figure out what's happening for that person in their life that they're not delivering. And that happens often for me. Someone will come and say, I'm overwhelmed at work, and we'll dig into what they've got on their task list or their outcome list. And I'll say, that doesn't seem like so much. What else is going on? And then from there you get, oh, well, this has happened and this has happened, and I'm dealing with all of these things in my personal life. And so from there we can say, okay, well, why don't you take the time that you need,
right,
and tackle the things that happen in your personal life, because life is messy, and it's certainly not, you certainly can't separate them. You can't say, bring your work self and leave your personal self at home. We're just one. We're one self, and it bleeds over whether you like it or not. And I think organizations that continue to not acknowledge that are going to lose good people.
And I mean, you're giving me every justification of why I can never stop doing this podcast, because until that person that hears that having bathroom breaks monitored at their company is not okay anymore, I can't stop my work. We've got a job to do, right?
What is happening? And the other thing I'll say is that, this is the way that people have been trained. This is the norm. Like, what we're doing is breaking through and being brave enough to say that actually doesn't matter. It's 7:30. That doesn't matter. That this is an opportunity for other people and other organizations to say, wow, there is another way. Because up until recently, that was the only way. You monitored absenteeism. You monitored how long someone was on their desk. You monitored how busy they looked.
Yeah. And
busyness is not a proxy for success. You can be the busiest person and produce pretty crappy results.
Oh yeah. So, I mean, I love hearing this. I remember when I was working in consulting, people figured out a way to get a bot to move around their mouse so that it would show that they were available and working on Skype Business when they went to the gym. Because if they went to the gym in the afternoon when their mind was tired and they needed a break so they could do the rest of the day, their manager wasn't able to understand that, and how that's there's way more research to prove now that we cannot work for 8 hours straight than there is to say that we can. So it's just so funny how much this stuff matters, and yet that resistance to change is still so present. So the thing you kept touching on for me, or what was piquing in my mind, was actually a lot about you have the potential to have a lot of amazing data about what you've done. whether it's from people analytics, knowing, do you do any sort of people analytics work? Do you measure success of your culture and cultural sort of contributions? I mean, it would be really interesting, I think, for a lot of people to understand when you were at about 250 people, laid off about 20, then started hiring again, what the sort of culture felt like, how people's trust in the organization was being reported, your ENPS score. Like, did you look at any of that, and do you believe in any of that? What is that like for you at Bench?
Yeah, we do invest in analytics, and we're just going through the final stages of hiring a strategist for my team, so that we can have more capacity and more opportunity to look at those things that are off the side of someone's desk right now. So we use Culture Amp, and we have experimented with a balance between surveying. At one point, we were surveying quarterly. The problem with it's a bit of a sort of a catch-22, because if you survey too often and don't create meaningful change, people feel like, well, you're not listening, so why should I tell you the things again? But if you wait too long, you potentially miss the window of the sentiment, how people are feeling. Ultimately, what we want to get to is a point where we know how people are feeling without having to administer a company-wide survey. But it is really interesting. It is really interesting to look at the results. And for sure, we lost people after the layoffs in April of last year. That voluntarily left. They left because they were uncertain about our future. They were feeling unsteady about, coming to work at Bench, and that's you can't blame them. So yes, we went through a period where I think the sentiment was concern. People were worried about whether there was going to be another round. That right. We were very intentional about doing it once, and that was all. But I think that it was to credit to Ian and the openness of the executive team that were able to sense it and then really have open dialogue about it. So we hosted on a very regular basis, shortly before the layoffs, during, and then after, is company-wide Q&A sessions where people could ask anything. And so Ian's philosophy is, you can ask me anything. Book a coffee with me anytime, and I'll tell you anything and everything you want to know about the company. Our financials, how we're doing as a company, those are shared internally with everyone. If you want access to it, you get it. There's no secret information. Of course, outside of our client information is private and our employee information is private, but anything that can be shared is. And so we knew that it was a difficult time, and we just said, let's just come together, share your fears, share your concerns with us. And then as the business started to turn around and our numbers started to increase and the opportunities started pouring in, I think that, coupled with the openness about how our business was doing and the opportunities in front of us, really changed the energy from that of, ooh, should I be looking for another job, to, wow, this is an exciting place to be part of, and Bench isn't going anywhere. Well, it is. It's just going
up. I love that. So, I mean, you're reminding me of a company that is similar in their transparency, which is Buffer. And I don't know if you've ever heard of what they sort of do, but they share their financials. They share even the way that they pay their employees. I'm curious, are salaries shared at Bench?
Yeah, that's a good question. And compensation is a very, very sensitive matter for an employee. It's possibly the most sensitive thing for an employee is their compensation. And one of the other journeys that we've been on is transforming our compensation to a more performance aligned program. When when the company was smaller, we had an approach which was, very impartial, and it was about, if you have this much experience in this role, you get paid this amount. And as we started to scale, we realized that approach didn't work anymore. We needed to be able to differentiate performance, reward performance. And so since I started, we've implemented variable pay almost across the business. So there's, bonus schemes and whatnot. Some parts of the organization, to answer your question, yes, we're totally transparent about our compensation. And in other parts of the business, we're still working to get it right. And so the intent is absolutely to share compensation, our framework and our salary bands. And I hope that is something we can do in 2020.
That's amazing. A great goal and a scary one too, because it's a can of worms to open up for sure.
Terrifying. Absolutely. Every time I think about it, I'm like, we should do that. That's terrifying. But that's never stopped us before, and we're committed. We're committed to getting there. I have an incredible person who owns and manages our compensation program.
Yeah.
He's doing such amazing work, and I have absolutely no doubt by December 2020 we'll be in a position to share salary bands, midpoints, ranges.
Wow.
Across the company.
That's amazing. Okay, I'm double checking to make sure no one has asked us any questions. No, if anyone that's watching right now wants to ask a question, please feel free. But I will continue to ask, and we've got about 5 more minutes. Are you good, Bonnie?
I'm great.
Okay, so the one thing that comes to mind as well is surrounding, again, this concept of growth. Like, it's, again, if I'm estimating in my head, I'm not the greatest at mental math, but you kind of almost grew like 40% last year. Is that right?
Yeah.
Am I close? Okay. How did that work in terms of making sure that the people that joined, and so you talked about kind of that first day onboarding, what was it called again?
Bench Academy.
Bench Academy. Now, how long does that last? I'm assuming it's not just one day. It's for how advanced you are in culture, it seems like you would do a lot for that. Tell us about your onboarding.
It was 3 days.
Okay.
And we realized that there was some repetitiveness and some redundancies. So it actually is 1 day now.
Okay.
But the immersion in our culture and the opportunities that people have to learn about our business doesn't stop on day one.
Exactly.
So,
and what does that look like?
For a lot of folks, they're joining this tech startup environment for the first time. So we talk about what it means to work for a SaaS company, what it means to work in tech, how the different departments connect to each other, how the big picture, what it looks like as a whole. Ian spends time with he always goes over because he's so passionate about why he started this company, the principles that sort of help us guide and navigate decision making. He spends time talking about that. The people team has a chance to chat with the new folks about these are our expectations for this is what culture looks like. We have I'm sure whether I say this. We have 4:00 Friday, which is an opportunity for benchmates to come together and share in a beverage on Friday at 4:00. And we talk about, this is a workplace. And so we want you to have a good time, but be an adult. Let us treat you like an adult. And then, where to go if you need coaching, where to go if you have, any concerns about your employee experience. So that really makes up the first day, but then it just continues in a less structured way.
And going back to this concept of what you've done a lot in terms of shifting from sort of just set your levels of or years of experience, and now you're kind of going more to performance. Are you starting to incorporate culture into performance? It's a question that I'm starting to ask people on the podcast because more and more, it's sort of like, Patty McCord always talks about like the brilliant jerk. And, how do you get that person that's not the nicest, but is really good at their job and is still getting, it looks like they're really great because their performance review doesn't incorporate that they're a jerk. So what have you done for that?
It doesn't fly, Tynan. We just don't. And I think there's another word than jerk, but we won't say it. We are incredibly unwavering in our commitment to the culture that we're creating. It's very intentional. It hasn't happened by accident. And that requires us to have sometimes, say goodbye to people who are really good at what they do, but just are toxic to the culture.
Right.
You can't have both. You can't make exceptions. There isn't a culture where you have, people feeling supported and thriving, but that person over there, they're producing really great numbers. So we'll just let them continue to be a jerk, to use your word. The Australians use a little more colorful language, but I'll reserve that today.
You're so kind. I would have just said asshole. That's what
okay.
You're fine.
So we are, that it is absolutely not tolerated. Any kind of bullying behavior, harassment behavior is taken so incredibly seriously. We want a workplace where people feel safe, supported, and can come and thrive. You can't do that if you're worried that somebody is intimidating you or, eye rolling across the table. It's just not tolerated. And it doesn't happen often at all because we're so intentional about the people we hire. We hire people first on attitude and second on skill.
Wow.
We're doing a lot of executive hiring at the moment, and you can be the smartest, most accomplished person, but if you have a big ego or think that you know everything and are not open to ideas, it just doesn't work. We look for people who are humble and brilliant. So you have to have the two ends, the two bookends there for it to work. So to answer your question, from a performance perspective, how you are being, the way you are being is equally, if not more important than the results you're producing.
That's amazing. So going into 2020, you've told us a lot about where you're going, but is there anything else you'd like to share? And even maybe something you would charge other people that are in a similar position to you, leading the culture and the people function of the business? What are you sort of saying, hey, join me on this, quest to do things better? What's one thing you're trying to do better? And maybe that you would say, yeah, you should probably do that too.
What's one thing?
4 or 5 things, but maybe not. I want to honor your time.
I think at the heart of it is we're here at Bench to transform the lives of 1 million business owners. It is really tough to be a small business owner and an entrepreneur. And what we do is take care of your finances so you can focus on your business. But we only get to do that. And other organizations only get to live their purpose and live their mission and achieve that mission if they have people that truly feel connected to why they're there. So your goal as people leaders is to unlock and let go of all the things, the corporate things that are holding your people back from achieving their ultimate potential.
Yep.
And therefore achieving your company mission. So really, really look honestly at what's working for your people and what isn't working, and don't be afraid to try something new. Maybe it fails, and if it does, you learn something, but you certainly won't get different results if you keep doing the same things you're doing.
Brilliant. Bonnie Powell, head of people at Bench. Wow, my mind is blown, and thank you so much for being with us. You're hiring still?
We are hiring. We are always hiring.
Okay, so if you've heard this and you're like, wow, I need to get out of where I am, I'm brilliant, I'm humble, throw in an application, because I think more people probably would love to work at your place of work.
Thank you so much for having me on here. And, it was, like I said, slightly terrifying to do a live event with you. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And thank you for the work that you are doing and for the stories that you're sharing and bringing into the world.
You bet. Love it doing it. I honestly love doing it. So it's a privilege. You're amazing. Be blessed.
Thanks, Tynan.